At Thanksgiving dinner, my sister raised her glass and announced, "Dad says the board will name me Chief Executive Officer tomorrow. Your office will be empty by noon." The stem of her wine glass clicked against her china plate. Sage from my mother's stuffing hung warm and heavy in the dining room, while the edge of the board packet pressed into my thigh beneath the tablecloth. Mom clapped before anyone else had even taken a breath. Savannah smiled at me over the candles. "I thought you deserved a little warning." Dad lifted his wine and took a slow sip. He did not correct her. Daniel Mercer, Savannah's fiancé, rested one hand on her shoulder, as if the vote had already happened and the company had already been handed over. I started laughing. It wasn't loud, and it wasn't because anything was funny. The first sound escaped, then another followed, and for a few seconds I couldn't stop. Savannah had just promised to fire me without knowing what was missing from the papers under my hand. I reached beneath the table, opened my phone, and sent 4 words to Eleanor Shaw, the lead independent director. "Move the vote to 8. Before I tell you what happened the next morning, I hope you're doing well. Stay with me because the people celebrating at that table had no idea what was waiting for them. And please subscribe to the channel if you enjoy stories about family betrayal, hard choices, and justice that has to be earned." This happened last Thanksgiving, 6 months before I finally sat down to tell it. At the time, I was 39 years old and had spent more than half my adult life keeping coal harvest systems alive. My father had founded the company in a rented machine shop outside Green Bay. By the time Savannah made her toast, we employed nearly 400 people and built equipment used in food plants across the Midwest. Savannah tilted her head. "What exactly is so funny, Meredith?" Mom's applause died in the space between us. Dad set his glass down with care, which was always more dangerous than when he slammed something. I folded my napkin beside my plate. "Did you read the complete board packet?" My sister's smile held, but her fingers tightened around the glass. I read what mattered. That wasn't my question. Oh, for crying out loud. Mom glanced toward Daniel, embarrassed on Savannah's behalf. "Can't you let your sister have one nice moment?" Savannah gave a soft laugh meant to show everyone how patient she was being. "Meredith thinks leadership means memorizing every footnote." "Appendices aren't footnotes," I said. Dad's chair creaked as he leaned back. "That is enough. This is Thanksgiving, not a board meeting." That answer told me more than a denial would have. If he had believed the packet was complete, he would have asked what I meant. If he had thought Savannah was exaggerating about the vote, he would have corrected her. Instead, he wanted the subject buried before I named the missing section. Mom reached for the gravy boat. "Your father has worked too hard for us to spoil tonight with business." The word "us" changed shape in my family depending on who needed something. When the factory lost power during a February cold snap, it meant I slept in my office for 2 nights while Dad attended a charity dinner in Chicago. When a supplier threatened to stop shipping bearings, it meant I drove 3 hours through sleet and stayed until we had a payment plan. But when magazine photographers came, it meant Dad and Savannah standing beneath the company logo while I stayed behind the camera answering calls. Savannah was good at what she did. That part mattered. Even if I had not always admitted it, she could walk into a room full of skeptical buyers and leave with 3 dinner invitations and a promise to review our proposal. She understood what people wanted to hear before they knew how to ask for it. I understood what happened after the applause. Broken production schedules, late steel, overtime limits, and warranty costs. The difference between a contract that sounded good and one that could keep a plant running. For years, our father had treated those skills as proof that we belonged in separate lanes. Savannah was the future people could admire. I was the person expected to make that future work. She raised her glass again. "To new leadership." Daniel lifted his. Mom raised hers too. Dad did not smile, but he raised his glass as well. I looked down at the packet hidden beneath the tablecloth. Page 42 ended halfway through a paragraph about the proposed sale and leaseback of our main plant. The next page was numbered 50. The executive summary referred to Appendix G twice, yet no Appendix G had been included in the electronic file sent to me or in the printed copy delivered that afternoon. 7 pages do not disappear by accident from both versions. I had emailed our corporate secretary just before leaving for Mom and Dad's house. Her reply had been careful. The appendices are being updated by Transaction Counsel. Any final materials will be circulated as appropriate. Those last 2 words mattered. Not when completed, and not to all directors. Only as appropriate. I pulled my red binder from the chair beside me and placed it on my lap. The cover was scuffed at the corners from years of plant meetings. Savannah once called it my security blanket. Maybe it was. Machines failed, people changed their stories, and memories became surprisingly flexible when money entered the room. Paper behaved better. Under the date, I wrote the time and 1 line. Savannah announced Chief Executive Officer result before board vote. Graham did not correct her. Mom watched me write. Must you do that at the table? Yes, I must. Savannah laughed again, but this time no one joined her. Write down that I offered you a graceful exit. You offered to empty my office before you had the authority to do it. I'll have the authority tomorrow. Maybe you will. The words landed harder than I intended. Daniel's hand left her shoulder. Dad pushed his plate away. You've had every opportunity in that company. I didn't say I hadn't. You've been compensated well. I didn't bring up my compensation. Then what is this? His palm opened toward me, taking in my binder, the papers, perhaps my entire presence at his table. What do you want? That was the question he always asked when I disagreed with him. Not whether I was right, not what the numbers showed. What do you want? As though every objection concealed greed. I want the directors to receive the same information before they vote. Daniel shifted in his seat. Barely an inch, but I saw it. Savannah set down her glass. The succession vote has nothing to do with the financing package. I didn't say it did. You keep mentioning the packet. I asked whether you read it. A thin line appeared between her eyebrows. She had answered too quickly, and she knew it. Dad stood and began collecting plates, though he had never cleared a Thanksgiving table in his life. We are done discussing this. Mom touched his sleeve. Graham, sit down. I'll get dessert. No. His voice stayed low. Meredith can decide whether she wants to be part of this family tonight, or whether she wants to cross-examine everyone. There it was, the old exchange rate. Silence bought belonging. I slid the packet back into my bag. I'm not cross-examining anyone. You could have fooled me, Savannah said. For the next 20 minutes, Mom performed normalcy with the determination of someone covering a stain before guests noticed. She served pumpkin pie. She asked Daniel about Christmas travel. She told Savannah that the local paper would love a photograph of 2 generations of coal leadership. No one asked what role I would have in that photograph. My phone remained silent beneath my napkin. Eleanor had not answered. That worried me more than Savannah's toast. Eleanor Shaw did not ignore urgent messages. A former commercial banker in her early 60s, she had joined our board when our lender required stronger independent oversight after Dad's automation acquisition went bad. She spoke slowly, asked plain questions, and had no patience for family theater. If she was not replying, she was either verifying what I had sent or calling counsel. Both possibilities meant the evening had moved beyond a family argument. When dinner finally broke apart, Savannah took Mom into the living room to discuss what she planned to wear for the announcement. Dad disappeared into his study. I carried my coffee into the kitchen because staying seated at that table felt like agreeing to something. Daniel followed me. He closed the swinging door with his fingertips and leaned against the counter. Up close, he smelled faintly of cedar cologne and the bourbon Dad had opened before dinner. You know tomorrow's transaction gives everyone room to breathe, he said. The phrase stopped me. Everyone room to breathe appeared almost word for word in the executive summary on page 12. I set my cup beside the sink. Which everyone? His expression did not change. The company, your family, and employees who need stability. Who is actually behind the acquisition vehicle? Mercer Ridge is advising the Capital Group. That isn't what I asked. The buyer is a special purpose entity backed by institutional partners. Which partners? Daniel smiled, not warmly. You know how these structures work. I know how disclosure works. He picked up a dish towel, folded it once, then set it back down. Savannah wants you involved in the transition. She just announced she'd clear my office by noon. She was celebrating. She was specific. A little irritation reached his voice. You make everything harder than it needs to be. That depends on what you're trying to do. For the first time that night, Daniel looked directly at my bag. Not at me, at the packet inside it. "Do you plan to support the board tomorrow?" he asked. "I plan to read what I'm voting on. The lender waiver expires at noon. So does the letter of intent. If the board delays, people could get hurt." There was the pressure point. Black Friday was not a normal workday for most of the country, and Mercer Ridge's offices would have been nearly empty. But it was also the last business day of the month, and Dad had arranged the transaction so both deadlines fell at noon. Counsel, bankers, and directors had already been told to remain available online. The urgency had been manufactured around a real danger. Daniel stepped closer to the counter. "Sometimes leadership means choosing the available option, not waiting for a perfect one." "Sometimes," I said, "someone hides the other options." The kitchen door swung open behind him. Mom entered carrying 2 pie plates. "There you are." "Savannah wants a family picture before Meredith leaves." "Before Meredith leaves. Not before everyone leaves." Daniel moved aside, his pleasant expression restored so quickly I almost admired it. "We were just talking about tomorrow." Mom's mouth tightened. "I asked everyone not to discuss business." "You asked me not to," I said. Her plates touched the counter with a dull ceramic knock. "Why do you always have to turn things into a fight?" "I asked for 7 missing pages." "You don't even know that anything is missing." "I know how page numbers work." Mom stared at me, then lowered her voice. "Your father is under enormous pressure. Savannah is finally getting her chance. Please don't punish everyone because you're disappointed." She made disappointment sound as though I had been passed over for a better parking space. I picked up my coat from the mudroom. There would be no photograph and no dessert wrapped in foil. Mom stood by the kitchen island with her hands folded, waiting for me to apologize for making her uncomfortable. Savannah appeared in the doorway. "Leaving already?" "I have a meeting at 8. Her smile returned. "So do I." Outside, the air had turned sharp enough to sting the inside of my nose. Frost had begun to silver the edges of Dad's driveway, and the windows behind me glowed with the warm yellow light of a family home that had never felt more like a stage. I sat in my car without starting it and opened the board packet on my phone. The screen showed page 42, then page 50, with Appendix G named but absent. A new message appeared from Eleanor. I opened it. "The agenda will be reordered. Graham will recuse from the related party review. Transaction counsel is already scheduled to be online because the lender waiver and letter of intent expire at noon." A second message arrived before I could answer. "The meeting starts at 8 o'clock. Outside counsel will be there." By 7:45 the next morning, the parking lot outside Coal Harvest Systems looked almost empty. A thin crust of frost covered the painted lines, and the wind pushed loose salt across the pavement with a dry scraping sound. Most of Wisconsin was sleeping late, shopping online, or standing outside stores, waiting for Black Friday sales. Our directors were gathering to decide who would control a company with nearly 400 paychecks attached to it. I parked beside the administrative entrance and checked the time. The lender waiver expired at noon, so did the letter of intent supporting the proposed transaction. Graham had chosen the last business day of the month because the deadline made hesitation look reckless. My badge still opened the exterior door. It would not by the end of the morning. The building smelled of burnt coffee and the citrus cleaner the night crew used on the tile. Only half the overhead lights were on. Somewhere beyond the administrative wing, machinery hummed inside the plant, steady and indifferent to whatever the Cole family planned to do upstairs. Eleanor Shaw stood outside the boardroom with Jonah Reed, the attorney retained to advise the independent directors. Eleanor wore a navy suit and carried no purse, only a yellow legal pad covered in her tight handwriting. "You brought the packet?" Eleanor asked. I lifted my bag. "Both the printed copy and the electronic file I received. Keep them with you until Jonah asks for them." Jonah shook my hand. "This morning is not a trial, Meredith. We are not deciding who altered anything. We are deciding whether the directors received enough information to vote." "I understand. And you are presenting facts, not accusing your father, your sister, or transaction counsel of misconduct." "I understand that too." His gaze stayed on me for another second, measuring whether I meant it. I did. Facts were enough. The missing pages did not need my anger to make them missing. Eleanor opened the boardroom door. I want you at the front beside the screen. I'll conduct the meeting. That was why I was sitting at the head of the table when Savannah arrived. She walked in at 7:58 wearing a cream jacket, dark trousers, and the gold earrings Mom had given her for her 30th birthday. Daniel followed several steps behind with his phone already in his hand. Dad entered last. Savannah stopped just inside the door. Her gaze moved from the nameplate in front of me to the screen behind my chair, where the executive summary waited beside an empty column marked Appendix G. The strap of her leather bag tightened between her fingers. "What is she doing there?" Savannah asked Eleanor. "Meredith is presenting first," Eleanor replied. "Take your seat. This meeting is supposed to begin with the succession vote. The agenda has been reordered." Savannah looked at Dad. "Did you know about this?" His jaw tightened. "Sit down." That answer did not comfort her. 4 independent directors joined by secure video. The representative from our family holding company sat near Dad, flipping through his papers without looking at anyone. Transaction counsel appeared on one screen. The lender's attorney waited on another, his camera off but his name visible beneath a black square. At 8 o'clock, Eleanor called the meeting to order. She did not waste time on Thanksgiving wishes. "The first item concerns the completeness of materials circulated to directors," she said. "Because the proposed transaction may involve related parties, Mr. Cole will not participate in that portion of the discussion." Dad leaned back. "I have disclosed every relevant relationship. That statement will be reviewed," Eleanor replied. "For now, you need to leave the room." A flush climbed above his collar. "This is my company." "You are the executive chairman of a company governed by a board," Eleanor said. "Those are not the same thing." No one moved. For most of my life, a room went quiet when Dad lowered his voice. People waited for him to decide what happened next. That morning, the silence belonged to Eleanor. Dad pushed back his chair, collected nothing, and walked out. The door closed with a firm click. Savannah watched him leave, then turned toward me. "You arranged this." I reported missing documents. "You moved the vote." I asked that the issue be addressed before anyone voted. Her chair rolled back an inch as she crossed her legs. "Then address it." Jonah nodded for me to begin. I connected the printed packet to the document camera and placed page 42 beneath it. The paragraph ended after a reference to additional lease obligations. Then, I placed the next sheet beside it. "Page 50 follows page 40. 2 in the packet delivered to me yesterday," I said. "The electronic file has the same numbering." One director leaned closer to his screen. "Are the pages simply misnumbered?" "The table of contents lists an Appendix G beginning on page 43. I displayed the contents page. Then I opened the executive summary and highlighted 2 references to Appendix G. "What does the appendix cover?" another director asked. "I don't know," I said. "It was not included in the materials I received." Savannah let out a controlled breath. Transaction documents were still being updated. "That happens." "It can," Jonah said. "The question is whether every director received the same version." Transaction counsel cleared his throat through the speaker. "Our office provided a complete set of final draft documents to management on Wednesday evening." "Which member of management?" Eleanor asked. "I'll need to check the delivery record." "Please do that now." The attorney muted himself. Savannah rested both hands on the table. "None of this changes the succession plan. The board has discussed my appointment for months." Eleanor looked at her. "Did you receive Appendix G?" My sister hesitated for half a second. "I received several versions of the transaction materials." "That was not the question," Eleanor said. Savannah's practiced smile appeared, but it had lost its warmth. "Yes. I believe my packet included it." "Did you read it?" "I reviewed the sections relevant to my role." "Did those sections describe any financial interest Daniel Mercer might receive if the transaction closes?" Daniel looked up from his phone. Savannah turned toward him before answering, and that small movement told the room where she expected help to come from. "Daniel's firm advises one of the capital partners," she said. "That relationship has been disclosed." Eleanor folded her hands. "Does he receive a fee tied to closing?" "You would have to ask him." "I am asking whether you knew." Daniel shifted toward his microphone. "Mercer Ridge has standard compensation arrangements with its clients." Jonah raised one hand. "Mr. Mercer, you are not a director. You will have an opportunity to answer through transaction counsel." Daniel's lips pressed together. Savannah leaned forward. This is exactly what Meredith does. She takes an administrative question, turns it into a crisis, and then presents herself as the only responsible person in the room. Her voice was steady, and the accusation carried enough truth to sting. I had corrected Savannah in meetings. I had taken work back from her when I thought she was moving too slowly. More than once, I had answered a question directed to her, because I already knew the number. At the time, I called it efficiency. From her side of the table, it had probably looked like I was building a case that she could not function without me. Savannah continued before I could respond. Under my leadership, we regained the Delaney Foods account. We increased qualified sales inquiries, rebuilt our trade show presence, and signed 2 regional service partnerships. Meredith opposed all 3 initiatives. I opposed the original pricing on Delaney, I said. The final contract used the margins my team recommended. And there it is. Savannah opened one hand toward the directors. She cannot allow anyone else to succeed without claiming ownership of it. One of the independent directors, a retired manufacturing executive named Paul Webster, spoke from the screen. Savannah, your commercial record is not the issue before us. It becomes the issue when my sister uses a pagination error to interfere with a leadership decision. 7 pages are more than a pagination error, I said. Savannah looked at me. You don't know what those pages say. No, that is the problem. The transaction attorney returned to the screen. I have confirmed that the complete file was delivered to the executive chairman's office, the president's office, and the corporate secretary. The version downloaded by Meredith Cole was created later. The room changed without anyone raising their voice. Eleanor asked, created by whom? We are checking the audit history. Dad opened the door before anyone invited him back. This has gone far enough. Jonah stood. Mr. Cole, the related party review is still in session. The missing pages concern draft provisions. Nothing was hidden. You were required to remain outside, Eleanor said. Dad ignored her and looked at the directors on the screens. The lender waiver expires in less than 4 hours. If we turn this into an investigation, we put payroll, vendors, and the entire transaction at risk over an unfinished appendix. Then provide the completed appendix, Paul said. Dad's eyes moved toward Savannah. She has it. My sister went still. A second earlier, they had been presenting a united front. Now Dad had placed the missing document in her hands before anyone had established who removed it from mine. Savannah opened her bag and took out a bound packet thicker than mine. She did not look at Daniel when she placed it on the table. Jonah walked around, compared the page count, and removed 7 sheets, beginning with Appendix G. He scanned the first page without reading it aloud. Sale and leaseback obligations, he said. Benefit plan transition language, advisory fee disclosures. Eleanor looked at transaction counsel. Was this appendix part of the material your office considered necessary for board review? Yes. Before any vote on the transaction? Yes. Savannah's voice sharpened. We are not voting on the transaction this morning. We are voting on Chief Executive Officer. Eleanor turned to her. The proposed chief executive has received transaction materials unavailable to another director, has acknowledged a personal relationship with an advisor to the transaction, and has not answered whether that advisor receives compensation upon closing. Those matters cannot be separated simply because the agenda lists them under different headings. Dad planted both hands on the table. You cannot freeze the company because Meredith is unhappy about succession. I closed the red binder in front of me. I have not asked anyone to appoint me. No, Dad said. You only made sure no one else could be appointed. Jonah stepped between his chair and mine without making the gesture dramatic. The board needs to preserve the records and determine whether disclosure was complete. Personal arguments are not helping. Eleanor called for a short recess. The directors remained connected while Jonah and counsel spoke in a smaller conference room. Savannah stood at the window with Daniel. Their voices low enough that I could not make out the words. Dad paced near the coffee station, checking his watch every few seconds. I stayed at the table. Winning would have felt warmer. Instead, the room seemed to narrow around the facts. Savannah had received the pages. Daniel's compensation appeared in them. Dad's office had received the original file. None of that proved who created my shortened version, and it did not erase the noon deadline. When Eleanor returned, She remained standing. The independent directors have agreed to form a special committee, she said. The committee will retain outside counsel and forensic support. The succession vote is postponed. Approval of the proposed transaction is also postponed, pending review of disclosure and conflicts. Dad's hand struck the back of his chair. Postponed until when? Until the committee has enough information to proceed responsibly. You may not have a company by then. The committee understands the liquidity risk. Savannah looked toward the screens. Who runs the company while this review happens? Eleanor glanced at Jonah before answering. Graham will step away from transaction-related decisions while the conflict review is active. Dad gave a bitter laugh. And Meredith takes over. How convenient. No, Eleanor said. Meredith raised the concern and may be a witness. Effective immediately, she will be placed on paid administrative leave from her officer duties. Her system access will be suspended while records are preserved. The words were clean and procedural. They still landed like a door closing. I remained a director. I would receive board notices and participate where permitted. But I could no longer enter the systems I had managed the day before. I could not direct plant staff, approve purchases, or call a department head and expect an answer. Savannah's face changed. Not into relief, into calculation. As president, she said, the succession policy names me acting chief executive when the chief executive is unavailable. That authority is limited to ordinary operations, Eleanor replied. You may not close the transaction, dispose of assets, obtain new financing, alter executive compensation, or interfere with the committee. Savannah nodded as though the restrictions were details someone else could manage. Dad looked from her to me, then gathered his papers. This board will regret today. Eleanor did not answer. Jonah handed me a written notice describing my leave and preservation obligations. Do not access company systems, request documents from employees, or contact potential witnesses about their testimony. Retain independent counsel. I will. Savannah watched me sign the acknowledgement. By 10:30, the vote had been postponed, the transaction had been frozen, Dad had been removed from the part of the company he cared about most, and my own authority had vanished with his. The office would not be empty by noon because Savannah had won her vote. It would be empty because the investigation required me to leave it. I returned to my floor with a human resources representative beside me. Employees looked up as we passed, then dropped their eyes to their screens. I took my coat, my framed photograph of the first production line, and the red binder Jonah had already reviewed. Savannah waited near the elevator. No directors stood behind her now. Daniel and Dad were gone. For a moment, it was only the two of us beneath the fluorescent lights. You made quite a show of sitting in Dad's chair, she said. It wasn't his chair. Her mouth tightened. You still think this was a victory? I think the board is finally asking the right questions. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside and turned to face her. Savannah held the door with one hand. You moved the vote, she said. You didn't stop me. The elevator carried me down in silence while Savannah remained on the 4th floor, one hand still resting against the open door until the panels slid between us. By the time I reached the lobby, my badge had stopped opening interior doors. The administrative entrance still released from the inside. But the small green light beside the reader had turned red when I tested it. Human resources had moved faster than I expected. My name remained etched on the office directory behind the reception desk, though every system that mattered had already begun treating me like a visitor. Outside, the wind had strengthened. It pushed against my coat as I crossed the parking lot with the red binder under one arm and the framed photograph tucked inside a cardboard file box. Through the glass wall above me, I could see the corner of the executive floor. Savannah had promised my office would be empty by noon. She had missed the deadline by 23 minutes. That did not make leaving easier. My phone rang before I reached my car. The caller identification showed Marcus Hill, our plant manager. I let it ring once, then answered. Marcus, what the hell happened up there? His voice competed with machinery in the background. Savannah just sent a notice saying you stepped away during a strategic review. I was placed on administrative leave. Did you resign? No. Are you coming back? I don't know yet. A wrench clanged somewhere near him, followed by a shouted instruction I could not make out. Marcus lowered his voice. People are already talking. Half the floor thinks Graham pushed you out. The other half thinks you tried to block payroll. Don't correct anyone for me, Meredith. The committee has started an investigation. I'm not allowed to discuss evidence or contact possible witnesses about what they know. You're calling me a witness now? I'm telling you not to put your job at risk defending me in the break room. He was quiet long enough for the factory noise to fill the line. You always do this, Marcus said. Do what? Decide what everyone else can afford before you ask them. My fingers tightened around the car key. What would you like me to ask? Whether I'd rather hear the truth from you than a company email written by your sister. I looked back at the building. The truth is that the board materials were incomplete. The vote was postponed, and I was removed from operations while the committee reviews what happened. Anything beyond that has to come from council. That all? That is everything I can say. Marcus exhaled through his nose. Then say that when people ask. Don't disappear and let Savannah write the whole story. The call ended before I could answer. He was right, but being right did not give me permission to speak. Savannah's message reached my personal email 11 minutes later. The subject line read, Leadership Continuity Update. Team, this morning, the board began a routine review connected to our ongoing strategic transition. Meredith Cole has temporarily stepped away from her operational responsibilities after raising questions regarding certain transaction materials. During this period, I will serve as acting chief executive officer and will work closely with department leaders to protect jobs, maintain customer commitments, and keep Cole Harvest moving forward. We understand that change can create uncertainty. Please avoid speculation and direct any questions to corporate communications. Our people deserve stability, and that will remain my first priority. Savannah Cole, acting chief executive officer. Every sentence was technically defensible. Together, they told a different story. I had raised questions, then stepped away. Savannah had remained to protect jobs. Speculation threatened stability. Anyone reading quickly would assume the problem began with me. No accusation, no lie clear enough to challenge. Just a clean arrangement of facts, designed to point in one direction. I sat inside my car with the engine off and read the message twice. Then I forwarded it to a lawyer. Her name was Rebecca Sloan, and she had represented 2 executives in a governance dispute involving a family-owned manufacturer near Milwaukee. Eleanor had not recommended her. That mattered. The special committee's attorney represented the independent directors, not me, and I needed someone whose only duty was to protect my position. Rebecca called before I reached home. I've reviewed the leave notice and Savannah's email, she said. Her voice was brisk, with none of the soft reassurance people sometimes mistake for kindness. Do not respond to the company message. I wasn't planning to. Do not contact employees about the transaction. Ask anyone to preserve documents on your behalf or accept company files through personal email. I understand. Do you have company material at home? My red binder. Personal notes from meetings. Jonah reviewed it before I left. Anything else? A printed board packet and the electronic version sent to my board account. As a director, you may have a You may have a right to retain board materials, but we will confirm that before you open anything. Until then, do not annotate, copy, or forward them. The binder sat on the passenger seat beside me. For years, it had been where I wrote down production failures, supplier promises, meeting dates, and the exact language people used when they expected memory to become negotiable. Now even touching it required caution. Rebecca continued. The committee may interview you next week. Answer only what you know. If you are unsure, say you are unsure. Do not fill silence because it makes you uncomfortable. I don't fill silence. You ran operations for a family business. I'm willing to bet you've spent 20 years filling every kind of silence. That ended the argument. By Saturday morning, my company phone no longer connected to email. My calendar disappeared first, then the internal messaging app, then the production dashboard I had checked before breakfast almost every day for 9 years. I poured coffee and reached automatically for a screen that no longer existed. The house was too quiet without the factory in it. No overnight maintenance report, no list of delayed shipments, no message from Marcus about a bearing failure on line 3. I had spent years complaining that work followed me home. Yet once it stopped, I kept listening for it. Rebecca sent me a written set of rules before 9. I could speak with my lawyer. I could organize personal records already in my lawful possession. I could not direct employees, collect testimony, log into company systems, or tell anyone what to say. So, I built a timeline. Not from hidden files or favors. From what I had received as an officer and director before the leave began, along with notes Jonah had permitted me to retain. Wednesday evening, Transaction Counsel delivered the complete materials to Dad's office, Savannah's office, and the corporate secretary. Thursday afternoon, a shorter electronic packet appeared in my board account. Thursday evening, Savannah announced the outcome of a vote that had not happened. Friday morning, her packet contained Appendix G. Mine did not. Those facts fit on one page. The question they raised did not. I opened the red binder to my Thanksgiving notes. Beneath Savannah's announcement and Dad's failure to correct her, I had written another line shortly before leaving for dinner. Lillian asked whether the employer match continues after leaseback. I had no leaseback documents. Lillian Park had directed benefits for 6 years. She was careful with language, careful with employee privacy, and almost impossible to rattle. On Thursday morning, she had appeared at my office door holding a legal pad against her chest. "Do you have a minute?" she had asked. "For you, yes." Lillian closed the door but remained standing. "I'm reviewing transition questions for the benefits communication." "What transition?" Her grip shifted on the legal pad. "The proposed leaseback." I turned away from my production schedule. "What leaseback?" She stared at me. That pause lasted no more than 2 seconds, but Lillian was not a woman who lost track of a conversation. "I may be ahead of the final documents," she said. "My question was whether the employer match continues through the transition period." "Why wouldn't it? I was hoping you could confirm that it does. Send me the clause you're reviewing." Her gaze moved toward the glass wall separating my office from the hallway. "I should check with legal first." She left without sending anything. At the time, I thought Transaction Counsel had circulated an unfinished benefits draft to her department before sending it to me. Careless, but possible. After seeing Appendix G in Savannah's packet, the exchange carried a different weight. Lillian had seen language about the sale and leaseback before I knew it existed. I did not call her. Instead, I sent Rebecca the note and described the conversation as closely as I could remember it. She forwarded the information to Jonah with a request that the committee contact Lillian directly. By Sunday afternoon, Savannah had released a video to employees. Rebecca obtained it because it had been posted on the public side of our company intranet, where customers and vendors could also view leadership announcements. Savannah stood on the factory floor in a navy blouse and safety glasses, with one of the assembly lines behind her. Someone had positioned the camera so the Coal Harvest logo appeared above her left shoulder. "I know many of you have questions," she said. "You deserve clear leadership, especially now." The line behind her was not operating. Without the machines, her voice carried too cleanly through the space. "Our company is facing a tight financial deadline, and delays may affect our ability to meet obligations. I will not discuss confidential board matters, but I can promise that my focus remains where it has always been, protecting this company and the families who depend on it." She paused before the next sentence. "Rumors and internal sabotage only make that work harder." Savannah never used my name. She did not need to. I replayed that section once, then closed the laptop. Rebecca called a few minutes later. "Do not post a response." "I know." "Do not call Marcus." "I know." "Do not send the video to a director with your personal commentary attached." "I wasn't going to." "You sound like you were going to do all 3. I carried my coffee to the sink. "She's telling 400 people I'm threatening their jobs. She is using language broad enough to deny that interpretation. That's why she's good at it." Rebecca was silent for a moment. "You don't say that. Like a compliment." "It is one." Savannah understood something I had ignored for years. People did not experience a company through board packets and cash forecasts. They experienced it through the person who explained what was happening. I had treated communication as decoration around real work. She had turned it into power. Monday morning, Jonah scheduled my first committee interview for later that week. His email also confirmed that all company systems had been preserved and that a forensic firm would review the board portal history. He included one warning. Do not contact Lillian Park. I called Rebecca. Why was Lillian named specifically? The committee has already spoken to her. What did she say? I don't know yet. You just told me not to contact her. Because council told us not to. That does not mean they owe us a transcript today. I paced from the kitchen to the living room, then back again. She saw the appendix. You believe she saw it? She asked me about a clause that only existed in those missing pages. Then your note matters. Her statement matters too, even if it conflicts with yours. I stopped beside the window. Across the street, a man in a Packers sweatshirt dragged 2 empty trash cans up his driveway. The ordinary movement irritated me more than it should have. What happens if she backs away from it? I asked. Then the committee looks for records. Distribution lists, document access, meeting invitations, email. Witnesses are not the only form of evidence. Rebecca's answer was correct. It did not help. Later that afternoon, Marcus sent a text to my personal phone. Lillian left early. Savannah met with benefits this morning. People are nervous. I did not reply, not because I did not care, and not because I trusted Savannah. I left the message unanswered because any response could be shown later and described as an attempt to influence a witness. That was the hardest part of the leave. For years, action had been my answer to uncertainty. A shipment was late. I called the supplier. A machine failed. I brought maintenance into the room. Someone made a mistake. I found the point where the process broke and corrected it. Now the only responsible action was restraint. On Tuesday, Jonah called instead of emailing. I need to update you on the benefits issue, he said. I set down the pen I had been using. Did Lillian receive Appendix G? She was provided transition language by the acting executive team. Savannah gave it to her? We are still establishing the distribution path. What did Lillian say about the employer match? Papers shifted on Jonah's end of the line. When he answered, his voice had the flat precision lawyers use when they do not want emphasis to alter the meaning. Lillian Park now says she never saw a pension clause. For several seconds after Jonah spoke, I heard nothing but the low hum of my refrigerator and the faint scrape of a snow shovel somewhere outside. She asked me about the employer match, I said. I know what your notes say. She used the word leaseback before I had seen it anywhere. I know that too. Then why is she denying it? I cannot answer that yet. Jonah's tone made the boundary clear. He represented the special committee, not my need for reassurance. Has she changed her entire account? I asked. She says she reviewed general transition questions but does not remember seeing language that changed pension benefits. The employer match is not a pension. That distinction may matter later. Right now, you should not contact her. I won't. When the call ended, I opened my red binder and read the Thanksgiving entry again. Lillian asked whether employer match continues after leaseback. I had written it within hours of the conversation, before Savannah's toast and before I knew pages were missing. The note proved what I had heard. It did not prove what Lillian had seen. Rebecca called before lunch. Daniel Mercer's attorney wants to discuss a separation proposal. I'm not separating from anything voluntarily. That is why we review it before answering. The meeting took place the next afternoon at a hotel near the airport, far enough from Cole Harvest that no employee would wander through the lobby and close enough for Daniel to claim he was not avoiding anyone. Rebecca sat beside me. Daniel had brought an attorney from Chicago and a folder thin enough to suggest the important parts were already memorized. He looked rested. That irritated me more than it should have. Thank you for coming, Daniel said. Rebecca placed her phone face down on the table. This meeting is for settlement purposes. Nothing discussed should be treated as an admission by my client. Daniel's attorney nodded. Agreed. A server poured water, closed the conference room door, and left us alone. Daniel slid a term sheet across the polished table. The offer was generous enough to look like kindness from a distance. 18 months of salary. Continued health coverage. Full vesting of my executive retirement benefits. A consulting fee if I remained available during the transition. In return, I would resign as chief operating officer, agree not to oppose the transaction, release employment claims, and refrain from making statements that could harm the financing. Rebecca read every line before passing the paper to me. You want me to approve the deal and disappear, I said. Daniel folded his hands. I want to reduce unnecessary conflict. You offered me a protected retirement package while Appendix G limits future employee contributions. His attorney shifted slightly. The document does not eliminate accrued benefits. I know what it does. It freezes the employer match after the transition period and gives the buyer broad authority over retiree health coverage. Daniel's gaze stayed level. Those provisions may be revised. After I resign? After the capital structure is stabilized? Rebecca tapped one paragraph with her pen. This language also bars Meredith from assisting any challenge to the transaction unless compelled by law. It is standard cooperation language, Daniel's attorney said. It is not cooperation language, it is silence with a severance check attached. Daniel leaned back. Call it whatever you like, but payroll does not care about terminology. He opened his own folder and turned a financial forecast toward me. The first page showed cash receipts, debt payments, vendor obligations, and payroll for the next 6 weeks. I had built enough forecasts to recognize the shape of bad news before reading the totals. Our available cash dropped below minimum operating needs before the next full payroll cycle. I moved to the second page. A major customer had delayed a milestone payment. Our borrowing base had fallen because inventory aged past the lender's preferred threshold. The temporary waiver protecting us from covenant enforcement ended at noon the following Friday. You did not include this forecast in my board packet, I said. It was updated after Thanksgiving. The customer delay was known earlier. Not at the final amount. Rebecca looked at me. Can you verify these figures independently? Not from here. Daniel pushed another page across the table. The special committee has access to the same information. You expect me to trust a forecast provided by the people asking me to waive objections. I expect you to understand that a factory cannot run on principle alone. The sentence hit where he intended it to. Daniel had spent enough time around my family to know which pressure point worked on me. He did not threaten my reputation or my compensation. He put 400 employees between me and the door. What happens if the transaction is delayed? I asked. Our lenders may reduce access to the revolving line. Vendors could tighten terms. Management would have to prioritize essential payments. Would payroll be missed? His attorney answered first. No one can predict a lender's response. Daniel did not look away. It is possible. Is it likely? If the waiver expires without credible replacement financing, yes. The room went quiet. I studied the cash forecast again. One supplier payment could be stretched. Another could not. Payroll taxes had fixed dates. Health insurance premiums were due early the following week. The numbers did not feel invented. They felt familiar, which was worse. This was the kind of shortfall I had spent years preventing before anyone else knew it existed. Daniel watched me read. The transaction is not perfect, he said. No rescue financing is, but it keeps the company open and releases Graham's guarantee. His eyes changed for less than a second. Your father's guarantee is part of the existing credit structure, Daniel said. That was not an answer. It is one component of several obligations being resolved. Does your firm receive a fee if the deal closes? Mercer Ridge is compensated for advisory work. Does your compensation increase if the deal closes before the waiver expires? His attorney interrupted. We are not here to discuss Mr. Mercer's personal compensation. Daniel placed one hand on the folder. The company needs capital. My incentives do not change that. No, I said. They only explain why you keep calling your preferred option the only one. His pleasant expression thinned. Do you have another option? I had none ready. Not one that could be signed, funded, and accepted by the lender in time. Rebecca closed the term sheet. My client will not respond today. Daniel stood. Take 24 hours. She will respond through counsel, Rebecca said. At the door, he looked back at me. Every day this drags on makes the outcome worse. At some point, opposing the transaction stops being caution and becomes a decision to let the company fail. I waited until he left before speaking. He believes that. Rebecca gathered the papers. That does not make him right. It makes him more dangerous. She looked at the forecast. It also means you need to find out whether the cash problem is real. The special committee granted my advisor limited access to a restricted data room that evening. I was not allowed to search internal email or employee files, but I could review financial materials relevant to the proposed transaction and respond to the settlement offer. By midnight, I had confirmed enough. The customer delay was real. Inventory eligibility had dropped. We were close to breaching the lender's minimum liquidity requirement. Some assumptions in Daniel's forecast were aggressive, but the central problem remained. Coal harvest was running out of room. The next morning, Marcus called Rebecca instead of me. She joined the call and reminded both of us that we could discuss operations only within the scope approved by the committee. "I need to know whether the plant is in danger," Marcus said. I looked at the cash schedule on my screen. Yes. No one spoke for a moment. "How bad?" he asked. "If the waiver ends and the revolving line tightens, management may have to delay vendor payments and restrict production." "Payroll? I can't promise it is protected." Marcus swore under his breath. "The proposed transaction would provide cash," I continued. "But the terms transfer the plant into a leaseback, reduce future benefit commitments, and create incentives that were not fully disclosed. So, blocking it could hurt people and approving it could hurt people. Yes, that is a hell of a choice. It is not the only choice yet. Do you have another one? Not one I can put in front of the board today." His voice hardened. "Then stop talking like the answer is already obvious." He sat back. Marcus had worked for Coal Harvest longer than Savannah had been out of college. He had defended me in meetings and challenged me on the floor. He cared about the company, but he had never mistaken loyalty for obedience. "I thought stopping the vote would protect everyone," I said. "It protected us from one deal. That is not the same thing." "I know. Do you?" The question stayed between us. After the call, I walked through my kitchen and opened a cabinet without knowing what I wanted. Coffee, perhaps. Something to do with my hands. For years, I had been the person who arrived with answers. When I lacked one, I worked until I had it and told no one about the hours in between. That habit had kept production moving. It had also taught people to wait for me rather than help build the solution. Now I needed a plan, and I needed other people to help create it. Before I could call Rebecca, a company-wide town hall appeared on Coal Harvest's public video page. Savannah stood in the main assembly area with Marcus and several department heads behind her. Marcus looked as though he would rather be anywhere else. "My responsibility is to protect jobs and customer commitments," Savannah told the employees gathered around the line. "We are working under a tight financial timeline, but I remain confident that decisive leadership can keep this company stable." A worker asked whether the plant was closing. "No closure decision has been made," Savannah said. Another voice called out, "Are we getting paid next week?" Savannah paused just long enough to show that she had expected the question. "Our current plan protects payroll," she replied. "What puts payroll at risk is delay." The camera angle widened. Employees exchanged looks. Savannah continued. "Certain directors have questioned the financing without presenting a funded alternative. They have every right to ask questions, but questions do not pay wages." Again, she did not use my name. Again, she did not need to. Marcus shifted behind her. The movement was small, but I knew him well enough to see the objection he was swallowing. The video ended with Savannah promising another update within 48 hours. My phone rang almost immediately. Eleanor's name appeared on the screen. "Did you watch the town hall?" she asked. "Yes." The committee did not approve her wording. "Can you stop her from doing another one?" "We have reminded her that ordinary operating authority does not include influencing the investigation. That does not solve the liquidity problem." I confirmed the cash forecast. So did our advisor. I returned to the table and opened the financial model. "How long do we have?" "The lender has agreed not to act before the waiver expires next Friday. After that, there are no promises." "What does the board need from me?" "Not a speech, not an accusation, a credible alternative." "Funded? Committed enough that the lender believes it can close." I looked at the dates, the obligations, and the thin strip of cash remaining at the bottom of the page. "How much time?" 8 days, Eleanor said. "If you cannot prove there is another way, the board may have to reconsider Daniel's transaction." Eleanor arranged the meeting with Dad for Wednesday morning, 6 days before the lender waiver expired. Rebecca attended with me. Graham brought his longtime attorney, Charles Whitmore, a man who had been sitting beside him at difficult tables since I was in college. We met in Dad's old office at Cole Harvest, the one he still called the founder's office even after moving most of his work to the executive suite upstairs. The room had barely changed in 20 years. A brass desk lamp cast a yellow circle across the dark wood. Framed photographs covered the walls, each one showing Dad beside a machine, a governor, a customer, or a smiling group of employees. The air carried the faint smell of machine oil that drifted in from the original production wing whenever the ventilation system slowed. That smell pulled me back to when I was 17. I had come to the plant after school because Dad had forgotten to pick me up from debate practice. The front office was dark, but the side door near shipping had been left unlocked. I found him sitting beneath that same brass lamp, with a stack of unpaid invoices spread across the desk. His tie was loose. Both hands covered his face. At first, I thought he was sick. Then I heard him breathe. Dad had always made noise when he was angry. Drawers slammed. Doors struck walls. His voice filled whatever room he entered. That night, the sound coming from behind his hands was small and uneven. Nothing like the man who gave speeches about grit and responsibility. "We may lose it," he said when he noticed me. I stood near the door with my backpack still hanging from one shoulder. "Lose what?" "All of it." He pointed toward the wall, though he meant the machines, the building, the house, and every promise he had made about the Cole name. Mom did not know how close the bank was to calling the loan. Savannah was 12. Dad told me not to frighten either of them. So I stayed. I sorted invoices into piles while he called suppliers. I wrote down payment dates and listened as he promised people money we did not yet have. At midnight, he bought 2 candy bars from the vending machine and told me I was the only person in the family strong enough to understand. That sentence became a job I carried for the next 22 years. Sitting across from him on Wednesday morning, I could still see the corner of the desk where I had stacked those invoices. Dad noticed where I was looking. "You remember," he said. Rebecca opened her legal pad. "We are here to discuss the proposed transaction and Mr. Cole's request for Meredith's cooperation." Charles nodded. "Graham would like to speak plainly before we address documents." Dad rested his forearms on the desk. Without the boardroom, the directors, or Savannah beside him, he looked older than he had at Thanksgiving. Gray showed along his jaw, and the skin beneath his eyes had the dull color of someone who had not slept. "The automation acquisition was a mistake," he said. It was the first time I had heard him use that word. 3 years earlier, Dad had pushed the board to buy a smaller company that made robotic sorting equipment. He promised the purchase would move Cole Harvest ahead of foreign competitors. I argued that the target's service contracts were weak, its software costs were understated, and its projected orders depended on 2 customers who had signed nothing binding. Dad called me cautious. Savannah called the acquisition our next chapter. The board approved it. When the projected orders disappeared, I spent 18 months combining production teams, renegotiating supplier contracts, and moving engineers into work we could bill. We saved part of the technology, but not enough to justify the price. Dad had never admitted that before. The market turned, he continued. Customers delayed capital spending. Interest rates rose. No one predicted the timing. "I predicted the customer risk," I said. His attorney shifted, but Dad raised one hand. "You did?" he said. I should have listened. The admission did not comfort me. It was too clean, delivered at the exact moment he needed something. Dad opened a drawer and removed a folder. "The acquisition debt weakened our covenants. Then Delaney delayed its payment, and inventory aged beyond the borrowing formula. We are days away from losing access to the revolver. I have seen the cash forecast. Then you understand what happens if the lender acts. I understand what could happen. Payroll becomes uncertain. Vendors tighten terms. Customers hear rumors and move their orders. Once that starts, no board committee can stop it." Rebecca glanced at me but did not interrupt. Dad's fingers pressed against the folder. "Daniel brought us a transaction that solves the immediate problem. It is not the structure I would have chosen in better circumstances, but better circumstances are not available. The structure releases your personal guarantee," I said. Charles answered before Dad could. "The guarantee is part of a broader refinancing. Does it get released at closing?" "The final allocation remains subject to documentation." Dad leaned forward. You are focusing on one provision while 400 families are waiting to see whether their checks clear. There it was again. The factory placed between us, like a hostage neither of us was allowed to name. What do you want me to do? I asked. His shoulders lowered, as though my question meant I was finally becoming reasonable. End the investigation. I cannot end a special committee investigation. You can tell Eleanor the missing appendix was an administrative mistake and that you no longer object to the transaction. That would not make it true. You do not know it was deliberate. I know Savannah had the complete packet. I know mine was created later. I know Daniel's compensation was not fully disclosed to me. Dad's palm struck the folder. Not hard enough to sound like anger, but hard enough to stop me. Daniel's fee does not change the company's need for cash. It changes whether he is a neutral advisor. No one in a transaction is neutral. Directors are still entitled to know who gets paid. Dad stood and walked toward the window. Beyond the glass, the original factory roof stretched toward the newer assembly wing. Steam rose from a vent and vanished into the gray morning. I built that plant when banks would not return my calls, he said. I put our house up as collateral. I signed my name when no one else would. And now everyone else is being asked to protect you from that signature. He turned. You think this is about my money? I think your money is part of it. You have always believed motives can be reduced to a spreadsheet. Spreadsheets are where people hide motives they do not want to say aloud. Charles cleared his throat. Perhaps we should discuss the proposed resolution. Dad returned to the desk and slid the folder toward me. Inside was a draft agreement. I would support the transaction, step away from the special committee process, except when required to cooperate, and remain with the company for 6 months to assist Savannah with operational transition. After that, I would receive a severance package and an honorary board title without voting authority. Savannah would have the position. Dad would have the closing. I would have a plaque. You expect me to train her while she tells employees I endangered their jobs, I said. She's under pressure. So is everyone she is blaming. She is your sister. That did not stop her from announcing my termination over Turkey. Dad's mouth tightened. You have humiliated her for years. Rebecca looked at me, waiting to see whether I would take the bait. I did not deny everything. I corrected her in meetings when I should have spoken to her privately, I said. I dismissed work. I did not understand. Because it was not operations. I have things to answer for with Savannah. Dad seemed almost surprised. Then I closed the folder. None of that makes this agreement acceptable. His chair creaked as he sat back. You would rather destroy the company than let her lead it. No, I would rather know whether the only plan on the table was designed to save the company or save you. His expression hardened. Those are the same thing. That sentence settled the question more clearly than any document could have. To Graham Cole, the company had never been a separate institution. Its survival meant his authority survived. Its name meant his name. Protecting the business, and protecting himself, had become so tangled that he could no longer see a difference. I pushed the agreement back across the desk. Give the committee the complete bridge loan file, every use of proceeds schedule, the personal guarantee, all side letters, and every related party disclosure. Charles began to object. Rebecca spoke over him. My client is entitled to request information through the special committee. She is not demanding that Graham produce anything directly to her. I continued. Give us 48 hours to determine whether there is another financing path. Dad laughed once. 48 hours. You said time is the problem. You cannot replace committed capital with phone calls. Then you lose nothing by proving me wrong. His eyes narrowed. And if you fail? If there is no credible alternative, the board will know that. That is not an answer. It is the only one I am giving you. For a moment, the office became the room I remembered from when I was 17. Dad behind the desk. Bills spread before him. The company in danger. Me standing close enough to be useful. The difference was that I no longer mistook being useful for being loved. Dad turned toward Charles. Provide the committee what it is entitled to receive. Charles made a note. We will coordinate with Jonah. The meeting ended without a handshake. By early afternoon, the special committee expanded the restricted data room. Rebecca and I reviewed documents alongside a restructuring advisor retained by the independent directors. We were not allowed into employee email, board communications outside the approved scope. or operational files unrelated to financing. There was more than enough inside the permitted folders. The bridge loan had been amended twice. Each amendment added fees, tightened reporting requirements, and increased the collateral tied to the family holding company. A cash use schedule listed transaction expenses, lender repayment, working capital, and something called a founder liquidity adjustment. The phrase sounded harmless. The amount did not. Several months after the automation acquisition began missing targets, Cole Harvest had transferred money to the family holding company. The stated purpose was to settle obligations connected to founder equity and estate planning. I read the entry again. The operating company had borrowed at higher rates while money moved in the opposite direction. Rebecca leaned toward the screen. Was this disclosed to the full board? I remember a distribution discussion, but not this amount and not under this description. The restructuring advisor traced the transaction dates. Part of the bridge financing appears to have replaced liquidity removed through the holding company. So the company borrowed to cover money that had already gone to the family, I said. Possibly. We need the supporting resolutions and accounting treatment before reaching that conclusion. He was right to be careful. The pattern was still there. I opened the use of proceeds waterfall for Daniel's proposed transaction. Payroll stabilization came after lender repayment, transaction fees, and several closing adjustments. Employee benefit commitments were addressed in a separate section with language allowing future review. Near the bottom, one reference led to a side letter. The file required a second approval from Jonah before it opened. 10 minutes later, access appeared. The side letter concerned Dad's personal guarantee. It listed the conditions for release, the amount to be satisfied from closing proceeds, and the order in which the lender would discharge claims against him. My coffee had gone cold beside the keyboard. Rebecca read over my shoulder without speaking. The company was facing a cash crisis. Employees were at risk. Vendors had reason to worry. Every warning Dad had given me contained enough truth to make his pressure effective. But when the transaction closed, the first person guaranteed relief would not be a machinist, a benefits recipient, or a supplier waiting to be paid. It would be Graham Cole. At the bottom of the page, beneath the lender's conditions, was the line that changed the entire fight. Release of founder guarantee upon closing. The line stayed on my screen while the restructuring advisor scrolled through the rest of the side letter. Release of founder guarantee upon closing. Dad had spoken about payroll, vendors, and 400 families. Yet the transaction documents placed his personal protection ahead of the benefit commitments he had used to pressure me. Rebecca closed her notebook. We need to separate what is unfair from what is actionable. The board was not given the full priority structure. That may be actionable, she said. The guarantee itself is not automatically improper. The concealment, the related interests, and the incomplete disclosure are the real issues. The restructuring advisor, Thomas Avery, nodded toward the cash forecast. And none of those issues add money to the company's account. Thomas had spent 30 years working with manufacturers that had reached the edge of their credit lines. He wore reading glasses on a cord and spoke without trying to make bad news sound inspiring. What can be done in 6 days? I asked. Not everything, Thomas said. Possibly enough. I had spent most of my career solving problems by taking them apart and assigning each piece to myself. That morning, the old instinct returned before I could stop it. I reached for the customer schedule, the vendor list, the real estate file, and the borrowing report at the same time. Thomas placed one hand over the customer schedule. You cannot run every work stream, he said. I know these relationships. Then tell us which ones matter, and let the right people handle them. I am the right person for some of them. For some, he agreed, not all. Rebecca watched me over the top of her glasses. This is where you practice not becoming your father. The remark was sharp enough to work. We built a small team under the special committee's authority. Thomas would handle the lender and cash model. An interim chief financial officer would verify assumptions and prepare daily liquidity reports. Marcus would test what production could pause without breaking customer contracts. I would speak only with customers and suppliers approved by counsel, and every communication would be documented. No secret promises, no favors exchanged in hallways, no money moved because someone trusted the Cole name. The first customer on our list was Delaney Foods, the same account Savannah had used as proof of her leadership. She deserved credit for getting them back to the table. The final pricing and delivery structure had come from my team, but without her relationship work, there would have been no contract to improve. Their chief procurement officer, Alan Pierce, joined a call with Thomas, Rebecca, and me that afternoon. "I am not asking Delaney to rescue us," I told him. "That is a reassuring opening," Alan said. "I am asking whether you would consider an advance payment on the spring equipment order in exchange for a modest discount and guaranteed production priority." "How modest?" I gave him the range Thomas had approved. Alan remained quiet while paper moved on his side of the call. "You are asking us to pay before final factory acceptance. For a portion of the order, not the full amount. The payment would be held under agreed milestones." "Is Cole Harvest insolvent?" "No," Thomas said. "The company is facing a short-term liquidity constraint tied to lender covenants and transaction timing." Alan gave a dry laugh. "That is banker language for a very unpleasant week." "It has been an unpleasant week," I said. "Does Savannah know you are calling?" The special committee authorized the call. Another pause followed. Alan finally said, "Delaney came back because Savannah rebuilt the relationship. We signed because your team made the contract workable. I am not interested in being pulled into a family war." "Neither am I." That answer would carry more weight if your last name were different. He was not wrong. We did not receive a commitment that day. Alan agreed to review a letter of intent for a limited advance if the lender accepted the structure and our production schedule remained protected. A letter of intent was not cash. It was still more than we had that morning. The second customer declined before I finished the proposal. Their chief financial officer said they could not explain an early payment to their audit committee. I thanked her and ended the call without asking for a personal favor. The old Meredith would have called again after hours and tried a different angle. The version of me sitting beside Thomas wrote no beside the customer's name and moved on. Marcus joined us by video that evening from the plant conference room. The noise behind him came and went as doors opened to the factory floor. "I reviewed all active orders," he said. "We can pause line 4 for 3 weeks without missing a committed shipment, but the installation contractors assigned there will not have work." "How many?" I asked. 14. The number sat heavily on the call. "What about moving them to line 2? I asked. "Line 2 does not need 14 people. Maintenance backlog? Maybe 4 positions for 2 weeks. After that, no." Thomas wrote the figures into the model. "What does the pause save?" Marcus gave him the amount. It helped. It did not solve enough. "What else?" I asked. "We freeze new hiring, stop weekend overtime except on customer-critical orders, and delay the expansion project. The expansion contractors have already purchased materials. Then we pay the cancellation charge or spend 10 times more continuing a project we cannot fund." I leaned back in my chair. "Savannah announced that the current plan protects jobs." Marcus's mouth pulled to one side. "Her plan protects this month's payroll by signing away the next few years. And ours cuts contractors immediately." "Yes." He did not soften it for me. There was no clean rescue hidden behind the wrong one. Every path costs someone money, work, security, or pride. The difference was whether those costs were disclosed, and whether the people choosing them also gave up something. The following morning, we spoke with Hartwell Steel, our largest domestic supplier. Their vice president, Denise Carter, had negotiated with me through 3 price increases and 1 rail strike. She had never mistaken a friendly relationship for free credit. "You are already at 45 days, Denise said. "My board will not accept 60 without protection." "What protection do you need?" I asked. "A lender-approved restructuring agreement, weekly cash reporting, and confirmation that Graham Cole no longer controls payment priority." The last condition surprised me less than it should have. "Why Graham specifically?" Thomas asked. Denise took a breath. 2 years ago, he promised our chairman that the automation acquisition would increase volume by 30%. We extended terms based on that forecast. The volume never came. "I did not know he made that promise," I said. "You were the one who called afterward and worked out the repayment schedule." There it was again. Dad made the promise. I repaired the relationship. Everyone remembered my competence and forgot why it had been necessary. "If the independent directors approve a restructuring agreement and provide the reporting you requested, would Hartwell extend new invoices to 60 days for 3 months? I asked. "New invoices only," Denise said. Existing balances stay on their current schedule. That would help. It would not be charity. I would not ask for charity. Denise's voice eased slightly. Send the terms through counsel. By noon, we had a conditional supplier extension. Thomas refused to let anyone celebrate it. We still need collateral and cash, he said. The real estate file contained our next possibility. Cole Harvest owned an old distribution warehouse 12 miles from the plant and 19 acres beside it that had never been developed. Dad had kept both because he believed selling property made a company look weak. The warehouse had not supported active production in 4 years. An industrial buyer submitted an expression of interest within a day. The price was lower than the value Dad had carried in his speeches, but close to the independent appraisal. Closing would take weeks, not days, so the buyer offered a smaller deposit if the board granted an exclusive review period. Thomas added the deposit to the short-term model, and the projected sale proceeds to the lender presentation. The numbers improved. They did not become comfortable. On Friday afternoon, the interim chief financial officer completed a revised plan. We gathered in a conference room at Rebecca's office because I was still barred from Cole Harvest systems and facilities except through approved meetings. The plan covered the next 30 days if every condition held. Delaney had to sign the advance payment letter. Hartwell had to extend terms. The warehouse buyer had to fund the deposit. Management bonuses had to be delayed. Hiring had to stop. Line 4 had to pause. Dad's shares had to be pledged. The lender had to agree not to enforce the covenant breach. I read the page twice. What happens to the employer match? Thomas pointed to the benefits line. The plan keeps it during the standstill period. After that, the independent board reviews it separately. And retiree health coverage? Unchanged during the first 30 days. No promises beyond that until the full restructuring is modeled. Marcus joined by video again. Tell me how many people lose work under this version. The 14 contractors on line 4 are most exposed, I said. We can move 4 into temporary maintenance assignments. The others may not have hours after the current week. What about salaried staff? No layoffs in the first 30 days, but open positions remain unfilled and executive bonuses are deferred. Deferred or canceled? Thomas answered. Deferred until minimum liquidity is restored. The board may later cancel them. Marcus looked at me. Including yours? I am on administrative leave, but yes, any bonus attached to my officer role is included. And Graham's distributions? Suspended. That needs to be in writing. It will be. Marcus rubbed one hand over his face. I can explain a line pause to people. I cannot explain another plan where workers give something up while the family keeps getting paid. Neither can I said. The words came out without drama because they no longer required any. For years, I had believed protecting the company meant preventing employees from seeing how close we sometimes came to trouble. That secrecy had made me useful to Dad. It had not made the company stronger. This plan would hurt people. If the board approved it, I would have to say so plainly. On Saturday morning, the lender sent its draft standstill terms through the special committee. The bank would suspend enforcement for 30 days if the board approved independent restructuring oversight, provided weekly liquidity reporting, pledged certain family shares, and transferred voting authority over those shares to a restructuring trustee during the standstill. Dad would keep legal ownership unless the agreement failed. He would not keep control. I read that condition several times, then called Thomas. Will Graham agree to the proxy? I asked. He will if the alternative is immediate enforcement against the guarantee. He may choose the guarantee over losing control. Then the board needs to know that too. By Sunday evening, Delaney had signed the letter of intent. Hartwell's counsel approved the extension language. The warehouse buyer wired the exclusivity deposit into escrow, subject to board approval. None of it was final financing. Together, it was enough to begin a serious conversation with the lender. Eleanor scheduled the review for Monday morning. She asked us to send the package to the special committee by 6 that evening. At 5:20, Thomas uploaded the final model to the committee's secure data room. Rebecca sent the legal summary. I attached a short operating statement that identified each cut, each assumption, and each risk. No promises about saving every job. No claim that the company would emerge untouched. Only another way. At 5:42, Delaney's chief procurement officer called me. We are withdrawing the letter, Alan said. I stood from the dining room table. Why? Our legal department received information that you accessed confidential transaction files after being placed on leave. I did not. I am not making a finding. I am telling you our company will not advance funds while there is an internal data investigation involving the executive who requested them, who contacted your legal department. I cannot discuss that. Alan, the special committee approved every document I reviewed. I hope that is established quickly. Until then, the letter is withdrawn. The call ended with the same professional courtesy he had used when agreeing to consider the proposal. Thomas phoned less than a minute later. The committee froze your participation in the data room, he said. What happened? Management produced an access log. It shows your account opened the restricted transaction folder yesterday morning. That account was disabled when I left. Then the forensic team will determine how it was used. Rebecca's number appeared while Thomas was still speaking. I merged the calls. Do not contact anyone at the company, Rebecca said. Do not contact Delaney again. Preserve every device you have used since the leave began. I never entered the system. I believe you. That is not the same as proving it. The rescue package remained open on my laptop, missing its largest customer commitment. 6 days of work had narrowed the gap enough to give the company another path. And one access record had pushed that path to the edge. Jonah called at 6:12. His tone was formal. Meredith, your company account accessed the transaction folder yesterday morning. Meredith, your company account accessed the transaction folder yesterday morning, Jonah said. I kept one hand on the dining room table because it gave me something solid to press against. The rescue model remained open on my laptop, but Delaney's letter had already been removed from the latest version. Without that advance payment, our alternative plan no longer covered the full liquidity gap. What time was the access? I asked. 10:14. I was here. Can anyone confirm that? Rebecca called me at 9:40. Thomas and I were on video from 10:30 until almost noon. That leaves a gap. I did not enter the system. I am not making a conclusion tonight, Jonah said. The committee has placed the data room on hold while the forensic team reviews the access. Do not turn off, reset, update, or delete anything on your devices. You already have my work laptop. We will need your personal laptop and phone as well. Rebecca answered before I could. We will arrange a limited forensic review under written protocol. You are not getting unrestricted access to privileged communications. That is acceptable, Jonah replied. I will send the proposed terms. The call ended, and my kitchen seemed to hold the silence afterward. 6 days earlier, I had walked out of Coal Harvest under investigation because I reported missing documents. Now a log suggested I had broken back into the same files I was accused of mishandling. Thomas spoke first. The plan is not dead. Delaney withdrew. They paused. There is a difference. They will not restore the letter while my name is attached to a data breach. Then the package moves without your direct participation until the review is complete. The old part of me wanted to argue that no one else knew the customer terms, the production risks, or the supplier history well enough. The thought formed quickly and sounded familiar enough to make me stop. Thomas had warned me not to run every work stream. Marcus had told me I decided what other people could handle before asking them. If the plan collapsed simply because I was removed, then I had built another weak system around one person. Take my name off the customer calls, I said. Let the interim chief financial officer present the model. Rebecca looked toward me. Are you sure? No, but do it. That night, I placed my phone and laptop on the dining room table and did not touch them again. Rebecca arrived early Monday with a courier from the forensic firm. We watched each device go into a separate evidence bag, watched the seals close, and signed the transfer record. The process felt excessive until I remembered how much depended on someone being able to say exactly who had handled what. By noon, I was sitting in a conference room at Jonah's office with Rebecca beside me. Eleanor attended by video. 2 members of the forensic team sat across from us, along with a stenographer who recorded the interview. Savannah joined from another room with her own attorney. Dad appeared on a separate screen beside Charles Whitmore. Jonah began without ceremony. Meredith, did you access any Coal Harvest system after your administrative leave began? No. Did you ask anyone else to access files for you? No. Did you provide your password to Thomas Avery, Marcus Hill, Rebecca Sloan, or any other person? No. Did you retain any authentication device belonging to the company? My company phone was collected. I do not have a security token. One of the forensic examiners, a woman named Priya Nair, opened a report. The activity occurred through a desktop session associated with your office workstation. My office computer was inside the building. Yes, I was not. Priya nodded. We are establishing physical access. Savannah's attorney leaned toward his microphone. The access was authenticated under Meredith's credentials? The activity was attributed to an existing authenticated session, Priya said. That is not the same as proving who was seated at the device. Savannah appeared on the screen. Her hair was pulled back, and the lighting in her conference room made her face look sharper than usual. You expect us to believe your account opened the exact folder supporting your rescue plan by coincidence? She asked. Jonah raised one hand. Savannah, your counsel will have an opportunity to submit questions. I am asking a simple one. I looked at her image. You should want the answer as much as I do. I want the truth. So do I. Savannah's mouth tightened. You have spent years deciding that whatever you do is justified because you call it protecting the company. The accusation came too close to something I had been trying not to name. Jonah turned toward me. That raises a separate issue the committee needs to address. Did you ever withhold operational concerns from the board to protect Graham? Rebecca's pen stopped. The easy answer would have been no. I could have pointed to reports, audits, and board minutes. I could have said every financial statement had been reviewed and every material transaction had gone through counsel. That would not have answered his question. I did not conceal fraud, I said. I did not alter financial statements or destroy documents. That was not what I asked, Jonah replied. No, I sometimes softened the way problems were presented. Dad shifted on his screen. Jonah continued. Give an example. After the automation acquisition missed its first-year targets, Graham continued interfering with production decisions. I corrected the resulting delays before the next board meeting. Did you report his interference? I reported the delays and corrective actions. Did you identify Graham as the cause? Not every time. Why not? I glanced at Dad's image. He sat motionless, watching me admit the habit that had protected him. Because I believed naming him would create conflict without helping operations, I said. I thought fixing the problem was more useful. Savannah gave a humorless laugh. You protected him when it made you indispensable. The words landed quietly. I protected the company, I said, then stopped. That was the answer I had used for years. Dad had used the same one in his office. I folded my hands on the table. At least, that was what I told myself. The result was that Graham kept making decisions without carrying their full consequences, and I became the person everyone expected to repair them. Jonah waited. I should have documented the pattern more clearly for the board, I said. I did not. Dad leaned closer to his camera. This interview concerns unauthorized access, not Meredith rewriting family history. Eleanor spoke from her screen. It concerns whether the committee can rely on the witnesses before it. I am not a witness, Dad said. You are the executive chairman whose office received the complete packet, Eleanor replied. You are very much a witness. Priya returned to the access report. The workstation associated with Meredith's office remained powered on after she left Friday. Her network credentials were disabled centrally, but the local session did not terminate immediately. Rebecca looked at her. How long did it remain active? Approximately 40 minutes after the leave notice was issued. The answer caught me off guard. The reported file access happened more than a week later, I said. Yes, Priya replied. The workstation was later restarted, but a locally cached session image remained available through an administrative recovery process. Who initiated that process? Jonah asked. We are still tracing it. Savannah's attorney leaned forward. Could Meredith have arranged it before leaving? Priya did not react to the suggestion. The recovery occurred after her departure. We have no evidence she initiated it before leaving. Jonah turned toward me. Did you give anyone instructions regarding your office computer? No. Did you leave it unlocked? I was called into the board meeting before 7:45. I signed in, opened the documents I was presenting, and went downstairs. After the meeting, Human Resources escorted me back. By then, IT had begun disabling my access. Did you touch the computer when you returned? No. The HR representative told me not to. Priya made a note. That is consistent with the preliminary camera review. Dad's attorney spoke for the first time in several minutes. Preliminary findings should not be treated as exoneration. No one is treating them as anything else, Jonah said. The interview continued for nearly 3 hours. They asked about the customer calls, the supplier extension, the warehouse buyer, and every document I had viewed in the restricted data room. Priya compared timestamps to Rebecca's emails, Thomas's video records, and the activity on my devices. Nothing placed me inside Cole Harvest when the folder was opened. That did not yet place anyone else there. By Tuesday morning, the special committee restored Thomas's access to the rescue model but kept me out of the data room. Delaney refused to reconsider until the forensic review ended. The lender agreed to continue discussing the standstill, though without the customer advance, our package remained short. Savannah released another internal message. The company is cooperating with an investigation involving unauthorized access to confidential materials. Acting management remains focused on stability and will not allow individual conduct to distract from employee needs. This time, the implication was less careful. Marcus forwarded the message to Rebecca with one sentence. She is telling people Meredith did it. Rebecca advised me not to respond. I followed her advice and spent the morning reading the interview transcript instead. At 3 that afternoon, Jonah called us back. Priya had obtained badge records from the executive floor. My office had no separate badge reader, but the corridor leading to it required access outside normal hours. At 9:56 on Saturday morning, Dad's executive assistant, Caroline Voss, used her badge to enter the 4th floor corridor. Caroline had worked for him for 11 years. She knew every director's birthday, every lender's preferred hotel, and which reporters could be trusted to print a quote without asking a second question. She also knew where old equipment was stored after an executive left. What does Caroline say she was doing? I asked. She says Graham asked her to retrieve transaction correspondence from his office. Jonah replied. My office is on the opposite side of the corridor. We know. Is there camera footage? Yes. The hallway camera showed Caroline entering Dad's office at 9:58. She came out 7 minutes later carrying a small desktop unit used by our information technology department for recovery and imaging. At 10:11, she entered my office. At 10:14, my account accessed the transaction folder. At 10:19, Caroline left carrying the same unit. Savannah joined the call with her attorney. Caroline has access to both offices. That still does not prove Dad instructed her to use Meredith's account. No, Jonah said. It proves the physical timeline. Dad did not join. His attorney said he was unavailable due to a medical appointment. Priya shared another document. An internal equipment request had been submitted Friday evening from the executive chairman's office. The request asked IT to make a recovery unit available for urgent board archive review. It did not name my workstation. A junior technician placed the unit in Dad's locked storage room before leaving for the weekend. He did not activate any account or bypass a security block. He believed Transaction Counsel needed to recover a corrupted board archive. The explanation was careless but plausible. He had not opened my account. Someone else had used the machine after it was delivered. Who knew how to recover the cached session? Rebecca asked. Priya answered. The process was documented in the equipment case. Caroline received a short instruction sheet from IT. Savannah looked away from the camera for the first time. Jonah displayed an email sent from Caroline's account to Dad at 10:23 Saturday morning. Archive confirmed. Access visible before noon. I will keep the unit secured. Dad's reply contained 3 words. Good. Say nothing. No one spoke for several seconds. Savannah's attorney removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. This may show Graham knew about the access, he said. It does not establish why it was performed. Priya opened another record. The transaction folder was not copied. No document was downloaded, printed, altered, or forwarded. The account opened the folder, remained active for 4 minutes, and closed. Rebecca looked toward Jonah. There was no attempt to obtain information. The activity created a log, Jonah said. A log timed closely enough to the rescue effort to make me look guilty and scare Delaney away. Savannah shook her head. Dad would not frame Meredith. Her voice lacked conviction, but she repeated the sentence as though saying it clearly could make it true. Caroline may have misunderstood, Savannah continued. She may have been checking whether the archive worked. Then why use Meredith's cached session? Rebecca asked. She may not have known which account it was. The screen displayed my name. Savannah looked at me. You do not know what she saw. No, I said. But we know what the log was later used to claim. Her gaze moved off screen again. Jonah ended the meeting by placing Caroline on paid leave and scheduling her interview with independent counsel. Dad's office access was restricted. The forensic team expanded its preservation request to include his personal business email and the public relations firm retained by the company. That last category seemed odd until the following afternoon. Priya found a group of documents in an archived communications folder. They were not deleted, but they had been moved out of the active transaction directory shortly after Thanksgiving. The first file was titled Contingency Messaging. The language was polished and bloodless. If questions arose about the undisclosed relationship with Daniel's firm, the statement said Cole Harvest had relied on information provided by commercial leadership. If employee concerns emerged, the statement said management had not authorized changes to vested benefits. If regulators or lenders requested clarification, the company would cooperate fully while reviewing whether certain executives had exceeded their authority. The draft never named Savannah in the opening paragraphs. It did not have to. Her title appeared in the attached timeline beside every meeting with Daniel, every presentation to the capital partners, and every internal discussion about employee communications. Dad's name appeared only twice. Both entries described him as receiving general updates. The timeline had been created 12 days before Thanksgiving. I read it at Rebecca's office with Jonah and Eleanor on video. By the third page, the plan became clear without anyone needing to say it aloud. If the transaction closed, Dad would be the founder who saved the company, and Savannah would be the new chief executive who made it happen. If the transaction failed or drew scrutiny, Savannah would become the executive who had gone too far. Did Graham send this to the public relations firm? Eleanor asked. Priya opened the email record. Yes. His message said he wanted language prepared in case the commercial team's disclosures created exposure. Rebecca looked at me. Before Savannah announced she would be chief executive. Before she knew the vote was not guaranteed, I said. Jonah scrolled to the draft press statement attached beneath the talking points. The first sentence appeared at the top of the screen. The company was misled by its commercial leadership. The sentence remained at the top of the screen after Priya stopped scrolling. The company was misled by its commercial leadership. Savannah's title appeared throughout the attached timeline. Her meetings, her disclosures, her relationship with Daniel. Dad had built a version of events in which he received general updates while she made every dangerous decision. He had created it before Thanksgiving, before Savannah lifted her glass, before Mom applauded, before Dad sat at the table and let his younger daughter believe she had finally been chosen. Eleanor removed her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. Savannah needs independent counsel before she sees this. She already has counsel, Jonah said. I will contact him. What about Graham? Rebecca asked. His access remains restricted. Charles has been notified that the committee is reviewing communications with the public relations firm. I closed my red binder. When does Savannah see the draft? As soon as her attorney is available, Jonah said. I want to be there. He shook his head. Not for the initial review. She is going to think I created this. That is precisely why you should not be in the room when she first receives it. She will go directly to Dad. Her attorney will advise her not to. Rebecca glanced at me. Advice and obedience are not the same thing in your family. Jonah did not disagree. If Savannah asks to speak with you after reviewing the materials, we can arrange it under counsel. The meeting ended shortly before noon. I left Rebecca's office with the image of Savannah at Thanksgiving fixed in my mind. The confidence in her voice had not come only from vanity. Dad had promised her something she had wanted since childhood. He had also prepared the document that would destroy her if the promise became inconvenient. That did not make her innocent. Savannah had read Appendix G. She had accepted Daniel's undisclosed involvement. She had announced my termination before receiving authority. She had stood on the factory floor and suggested my questions threatened payroll. Being used did not erase the people she had chosen to use. Jonah called at 4:17. Savannah has requested a joint meeting, he said. When? Tomorrow morning. Her counsel will attend. Graham and Daniel will not. Has she seen the full file? She has seen the talking points, draft statement, timeline metadata, and the email from Graham. What did she say? That is for her to tell you. The meeting took place at Jonah's office in the same conference room where the committee had questioned me about the false access record. Savannah sat at the far end beside her attorney, Michael Grant. Her cream jacket was gone. She wore a gray sweater, no earrings, and the skin beneath her eyes looked raw. She did not greet me. Jonah set a printed copy of the draft statement between us. Savannah requested this meeting because she believes Meredith may have information relevant to her position. Michael turned toward my sister. You may ask questions. Do not speculate, and do not make statements about documents you have not reviewed with me. Savannah kept her eyes on the paper. How long have you known? I saw it yesterday, I said. Did you know Dad planned to blame me when you walked into Thanksgiving dinner? No. You expect me to believe that? I knew pages were missing. I did not know this existed. Her fingers touched the first page, then pulled away. You must have suspected something. I suspected the transaction protected Dad and Daniel. I did not know Dad had prepared a public statement naming commercial leadership. It does not name me. It does not need to. Savannah looked at Jonah. Has Dad admitted writing it? No, Jonah said. The email record shows he sent the talking points to the communications firm and requested contingency language. He may have been preparing for every possibility. Michael spoke quietly. Savannah. She ignored him. A responsible chairman prepares for questions. Then why does the timeline remove him from every sensitive decision? I asked. Her gaze snapped back to me. Because I led the commercial meetings. You attended them. That is not the same as creating the structure. You were not there. No, I was running the company while you and Daniel planned how to sell the building underneath it. The room tightened. Michael raised one hand. We are not going to trade accusations. Savannah leaned back. You always do that. Do what? Reduce everything I did to parties, speeches, and Daniel. I did not say parties. You did not have to. Her voice had changed. The polished tone from the town hall was gone, leaving something rougher underneath. You talked over me in board meetings, Savannah said. You corrected my numbers before I finished speaking. When Delaney came back, you told everyone operations saved the contract. Operations made the contract profitable, and I reopened the door. Yes. The word interrupted whatever argument she had prepared. Savannah stared at me. You did reopen the door, I said. You rebuilt that relationship. I treated that work like decoration because I could not measure it on a production report. Michael looked between us but said nothing. I continued before I could turn the admission into an excuse. I corrected you in front of people when I should have spoken to you privately. I took projects away instead of teaching you what I thought was missing. Then I blamed you for not knowing things I had never let you learn. Something flickered across her face, then disappeared. But I was right about the transaction, I said. And I was right to stop the vote. There it is. Yes, there it is. Both things can be true. Savannah looked down at the draft statement again. Dad said you would never accept anyone else leading. Dad said what each of us needed to hear. He said you hated me. I did not hate you. You made it easy to believe. That one belonged to me. I had spent years speaking about Savannah as though her ambition were childish, while treating my own need for control as duty. Dad did not invent every crack between us. He only learned where to press. Savannah turned the draft statement over. What happens if I cooperate? Jonah answered. That depends on what you provide, its accuracy, and your own conduct. Do I remain acting chief executive? No decision has been made, Jonah said. Her eyes moved to me. Will you support me staying? No. The answer came without hesitation. Savannah's jaw tightened. At least you are honest. You received the complete appendix and did not disclose that I had a shortened version. You knew Daniel had a financial interest. You used your position to pressure Lillian and told employees that my questions threatened their wages. I was trying to keep the company open. So was Dad. She flinched. Michael placed his pen on the table. Savannah, Ask the questions we discussed. She folded her arms. If I give the committee my phone, do I receive immunity from company claims? Jonah replied carefully. The committee cannot promise immunity in advance. Will I keep my equity? Your vested ownership is a separate issue. Compensation tied to the transaction may be reviewed. Will I be allowed to return after the investigation? No one can promise that, Eleanor said from the video screen. Savannah turned to me again. And what exactly are you offering? A chance to tell the truth. That is not an offer. It is the only one I have. You want my evidence, but you will not protect me. I cannot erase what you chose. Her chair moved back with a sharp scrape. Michael touched her sleeve, but she stood. You have wanted this for years, Savannah said. You wanted Dad exposed. You wanted me humiliated. Now you get the chair and still call yourself responsible. I have not been offered the chair. You will be. If the board offers it, I will not accept under the old structure. She gave a tired laugh. You always have conditions. Yes, that was one part of me I had no intention of apologizing for. Savannah gathered her bag. This meeting is over. Michael remained seated. Savannah, we have not finished. I have. She walked out before her attorney could stop her. For the rest of that day, I heard nothing. The committee did not tell me where she went or whom she called. Jonah only confirmed that her attorney remained in contact and that she had been instructed not to destroy or alter any device. The sequence became clear later, after Savannah surrendered her records and sat for 2 interviews. She called Daniel first. Their conversation began by video, then continued in person at a private conference room Mercer Ridge used near the airport. Savannah told him at the start that she was recording the meeting for her legal notes. Daniel objected, but after consulting his attorney by phone, he continued with the understanding that the recording might be reviewed by counsel. Savannah asked whether Mercer Ridge would defend her if the committee accused her of incomplete disclosure. Daniel told her the firm would cooperate with any lawful request. She asked a simpler question. Will you protect me? His answer took longer. The recording captured the sound of a door closing, then Daniel's voice. I cannot make personal promises that conflict with my obligations to the fund. Savannah reminded him that he had drafted the commercial presentation, introduced the special purpose vehicle, and told her the related party language was sufficient. Daniel said transaction counsel had prepared the disclosures. She asked about the equity agreement. He told her it had never been finalized. The file on her phone showed otherwise. The draft promised Savannah a minority interest in the restructured company if she became chief executive, supported the transaction, and ensured I no longer controlled operations. Daniel called it an incentive proposal. Savannah called it proof that he had paid her to remove me. His attorney advised him not to answer. Then Savannah asked whether he still intended to marry her. The recording held 6 seconds of silence. I do not think we should discuss our personal relationship while there is an investigation, Daniel said. You discussed it when you needed access to my family. That is unfair. Is the wedding still happening? Another pause followed. I think we need distance. Daniel did not raise his voice. He did not insult her. He simply removed their engagement from the transaction as if deleting an unnecessary cost. Savannah left the ring on the conference table. She went to Dad next. That conversation was not recorded, but Caroline had already begun cooperating with the committee and later confirmed Savannah entered the founder's office shortly after 6. Dad's access to electronic systems had been restricted, but he was still permitted to meet counsel and retrieve personal items under supervision. Michael attended part of the meeting. Charles sat beside Dad. Savannah placed the draft press statement on his desk. According to her interview, she asked one question. Were you going to blame me? Dad said the statement had been prepared by public relations advisors who did not understand the business. Savannah showed him the email he had sent. He said a chairman had to prepare for every outcome. She pointed to the timeline that removed him from the most important meetings. Dad told her she had led those meetings. Savannah asked whether he had ever intended to make her chief executive, or whether he only needed her signature until closing. Dad answered that she would have been chief executive if she had been strong enough to control the situation. The words matched him so closely that I could hear his voice when I later read the interview transcript. Savannah said, "You told me Meredith was the threat." Dad replied, "Meredith became the threat when she chose disloyalty. What am I now? You are my daughter, start acting like it. With Dad, love always returned as a command. Savannah asked what he wanted her to do. He told her to reject the committee's version, preserve privilege, and stand beside the family. He said Daniel would come back once the transaction stabilized. She told him Daniel had ended the engagement. Dad's response was not sympathy. He asked whether Daniel still supported the deal. Savannah left soon afterward. At 9 that night, Michael called Jonah and requested a secure evidence transfer for the following morning. I did not know about the request until Rebecca phoned me after breakfast. Savannah is surrendering her phone and cloud account, she said. Voluntarily? Through counsel, under a written protocol. What is on it? We will know after the forensic team creates an image. Did she ask for immunity again? Yes. And the committee refused to promise it. I sat at my kitchen table with the red binder closed beside me. Why is she doing it? Ask her when this is over. The transfer happened at Jonah's office. Savannah brought 2 phones, a tablet, and access credentials for a cloud backup. Michael carried the devices in separate envelopes. Priya photographed each item, recorded serial numbers, and placed them into evidence bags before anyone opened a file. Savannah did not hand anything to me. She did not ask to see me. By afternoon, Priya had created forensic copies and generated verification hashes. The originals were sealed again and returned to Savannah's attorney subject to preservation requirements. The first report arrived that evening. Her phone contained text messages from Dad instructing her to sign the commercial disclosure without waiting for my review. Do not let Meredith turn this into another 6-week exercise. It contained a message from Daniel asking her to delete their informal discussion after outside counsel circulated the final language. Best to keep personal communications separate from company records. There was also the equity agreement, sent from Daniel's personal account, promising Savannah an ownership interest if the transaction closed and I was removed from operational control. My sister had not kept those messages because she planned to expose anyone. She had kept them because she did not fully trust the 2 men she was helping. That did not make the evidence less useful. The next morning, Jonah convened a limited session with counsel. Savannah attended from Michael's office. I joined Rebecca from hers. Priya presented the preliminary authentication results and warned that the committee had not yet determined whether every message represented a complete conversation. Savannah sat very still. Jonah asked her whether she had known Daniel would receive a closing-related benefit. Yes, she said. Did you disclose the personal equity proposal to the board? No. Why not? Daniel said it was not final. Did you understand that employee contributions could be reduced after the transition? I knew future benefits were under review. Did you pressure Lillian Park to change her language? Savannah looked down. I told her not to alarm employees before the transaction was approved. That was not the question. Yes, she said. I told her to revise it. No one spoke for several seconds. My sister lifted her eyes toward the camera. Dad used me. Daniel used me. I know that is what everyone wants me to say. That is not what I want, I said. What do you want? I want you to stop using them as the explanation for what you did to me. Savannah's mouth trembled once, then steadied. You are right, she said. They did not make me announce your firing. They did not make me send the company messages. I wanted you gone. The mission did not repair anything. It did, however, belong to her. Priya opened the final audio file. It came from the recorded meeting with Daniel, beginning after both sides acknowledged the recording. His voice sounded flatter than it had in person, stripped of the confidence his smile usually supplied. Savannah asked what would happen if lenders, employees, or the board challenged the undisclosed terms. Daniel answered without hesitation. Commercial leadership takes responsibility. That means you, Savannah. The voice memo ended, and Daniel's last sentence seemed to remain in the conference room after the speakers went quiet. Commercial leadership takes responsibility. That means you, Savannah. My sister did not look at me. Her attorney closed the transcript in front of him, while Jonah asked Priya to confirm the recording's chain of custody for the board packet. 3 days later, we returned to Coal Harvest for the meeting that would decide whether the company survived and who would be allowed to remain inside it. The boardroom looked almost unchanged from the morning Savannah had found me sitting at the head of the table. The same windows faced the factory roof. The same framed photograph of Dad cutting the ribbon on the original plant hung near the door. This time, Eleanor sat in the chair at the head, and Graham's nameplate had been moved to the side. Dad entered with Charles Whitmore and took his assigned seat without greeting anyone. Savannah came in beside Michael Grant, carrying no bag and wearing no ring. Daniel attended by secure video from his firm's counsel's office. The independent directors appeared on the wall screens. Representatives for the lender and transaction counsel waited on separate lines. Jonah sat beside Priya and a stack of indexed exhibits, thick enough to require 2 binders. Eleanor called the meeting to order. "We have 4 matters before us," she said. "The special committee's preliminary findings, the proposed transaction, governance, and leadership, and the company's immediate liquidity plan." Dad placed both hands on the table. "Before we begin, I object to the word findings. This process has been rushed and infected by family conflict." Eleanor did not raise her voice. "Your objection will be recorded. I am the founder and controlling shareholder. You are also the executive chairman whose conduct is under review." Charles touched Dad's sleeve, and for once, he stopped. Jonah began with the board materials. Priya displayed the file history from the board portal. Transaction counsel had delivered a complete packet containing Appendix G to Dad's office, Savannah's office, and the corporate secretary. Several hours later, a second version had been created. That version removed 7 pages and became the file assigned to my director account. The hash values differed, the page count differed, the distribution record did not. Transaction counsel confirmed Appendix G should have been available to every director before any vote connected to the deal. Dad leaned toward his microphone. "No one has shown that I altered the packet. No one is making that single claim based on the file history alone," Jonah said. "The committee is presenting a sequence of events." He turned to the benefits documents. Appendix G did not take away benefits employees had already earned. It allowed the new owner to freeze future employer contributions after a transition period, review retiree health coverage, and close the main plant after certain conditions were met. Lillian Park joined through a separate video line with her own attorney. Her voice shook at first, but she kept going. She confirmed that Savannah's office had sent her the benefits language before Thanksgiving. She had asked me about the employer match because I was the operating executive most likely to know whether the provision had been approved. After the board delayed the vote, Savannah called her into a meeting. "What were you instructed to do?" Jonah asked. Lillian looked down at a paper beside her. "I was told not to use the words pension reduction or benefit cut. I was told those phrases could create panic and threaten financing." "Did you believe your original question to Meredith was inaccurate?" "No." Savannah's attorney whispered something to her. My sister nodded once, then spoke. "I told Lillian to avoid alarming employees before final terms were approved. I should not have pressured her to change her account." Dad turned toward her. "Savannah, do not make statements your attorney has not advised." Michael's expression sharpened. "My client is represented by me." That was the first visible crack in Dad's control that morning. Jonah moved to Daniel's financial interest. The side letter showed Mercer Ridge would receive advisory compensation upon closing. Daniel also stood to gain through a carried interest arrangement connected to the investment vehicle. Savannah's private equity proposal offered her a minority interest in the restructured company if the deal closed, and I was removed from operational control. Daniel's attorney appeared beside him on the screen. The equity proposal was preliminary and never executed. "It was sent to Savannah before the succession vote," Jonah said. "A draft does not create a binding right." "No," Eleanor replied. "It creates a disclosure issue." Daniel looked into the camera. "Savannah was responsible for disclosing her personal arrangements." My sister finally looked at him. "You told me it was not final and did not need to go to the board. I told you to consult counsel. You sent it from your personal email, because it concerned personal compensation." "You mean mine," Savannah said. "Not yours." Dad shifted toward the directors. "This is exactly the problem." Savannah allowed her personal relationship to interfere with a corporate transaction. "I relied on her commercial disclosures." The sentence matched his draft statement almost word for word. Savannah stared at him. "You told me what to sign. I expected you to exercise judgment. You told me Meredith would drag the company into bankruptcy if I waited." Dad spread one hand. "You were president. Leadership requires decisions." My sister's face tightened. "And when those decisions became dangerous, you prepared a press release saying I exceeded my authority." Charles leaned toward Dad, speaking under his breath, but Graham did not stop. You did exceed your authority. Savannah opened the binder Michael had brought and removed a printed message. You wrote, sign the disclosure today. Do not let Meredith turn this into another 6-week exercise. Dad looked at the page. That does not say I told you to conceal anything. No, Savannah said. It only shows you wanted my signature before Meredith could read the terms. For years, Dad had kept us divided by telling each of us the other was the obstacle. In that room, with the directors listening and every statement entering the minutes, the method no longer worked. Jonah did not allow the argument to continue. He presented the false access record next. Badge data placed Caroline Voss on the executive floor. Hallway footage showed her carrying the recovery unit into my office. The workstation log recorded my cached session opening the transaction folder. Caroline's email to Dad said the access was visible. Dad's reply told her to say nothing. No documents had been copied, altered, or downloaded. The action had created only one useful product. A log bearing my name. Dad looked toward Priya. Caroline believed she was testing an archive. Priya opened the equipment request. The archive could have been tested using an administrative account. Your assistant followed written recovery instructions to restore Meredith's cached session. I did not write those instructions. You requested the recovery device and received confirmation after the access occurred, Jonah said. Caroline acted beyond what I authorized. Savannah gave a short, bitter laugh. That seems to happen around you a lot. Dad's head turned toward her. Be very careful. Or what? She asked. You'll blame me twice? Eleanor struck the table once with the flat of her hand. The sound was not loud, but it ended the exchange. We will proceed, she said. Jonah presented the contingency messaging, the draft press statement, and the timeline that placed Savannah beside every sensitive meeting while describing Dad as a passive recipient of updates. Daniel's attorney argued the documents reflected ordinary crisis planning. Charles called them privileged preparations. Jonah did not claim they proved the entire case. He showed when they had been created, who had requested them, and how closely their language matched the explanations Dad and Daniel were now giving. Then Savannah's phone records were entered into the committee summary. The texts from Dad, the deletion request from Daniel, the private equity proposal, the recorded meeting. Daniel's attorney objected to portions of the audio being characterized without the full context. Priya confirmed that the board had access to the complete file, not only the excerpt. Daniel spoke before his attorney could stop him. My firm offered a transaction that preserved the company. The Cole family failed to manage its own conflicts. Dad turned toward the screen. Your firm designed the structure, based on information management provided. You assured me the disclosures were sufficient. I assured Savannah that transaction counsel would review them. My sister looked from Daniel to Dad. I knew the future benefit contributions were at risk, she said. I knew Daniel had an interest in closing. I wanted the chief executive position, and I wanted Meredith out because I believed she would never let me lead. Her voice remained steady, though her fingers pressed hard against the edge of the table. I did not design the founder payment. I did not order anyone into Meredith's office. I did not prepare that press statement. But I signed documents I had not fully questioned, and I used my acting authority to make Meredith look dangerous. No one rescued her from the admission. I did not either. Dad used you, I said. Daniel used you. But you chose to use me. Savannah's eyes met mine. I know. That was all we had room for. Eleanor called a recess before the liquidity presentation. We remained in the room while the independent directors spoke privately with lender counsel. Dad stood near the windows with Charles. Savannah sat beside Michael and stared at her closed phone. Daniel's video remained active, but his camera had been turned off. Thomas entered when the meeting resumed, along with the interim chief financial officer and Marcus. Our rescue package had changed since Delaney withdrew its first letter. Once the preliminary forensic report cleared me of direct access, Delaney agreed to restore a smaller advance, provided the independent board controlled the funds. It was less than we had requested, but enough to close part of the gap. Thomas presented the standstill first. The lender would suspend enforcement for 30 days if family shares were pledged, voting authority over those shares transferred temporarily to a restructuring trustee, and Graham no longer controlled payment priority. Hartwell Steel would extend terms on new invoices. The warehouse buyer would fund an exclusivity deposit. 2 customers would make limited prepayments tied to production milestones. The plan also stopped hiring, delayed management bonuses, suspended family distributions, paused the expansion project, and shut down Line 4 for 3 weeks. Marcus did not hide the consequence. 10 contractors will lose scheduled work after this week, he said. 4 can move into temporary maintenance assignments. I cannot promise positions for the other 6. One director asked whether salaried layoffs were expected. Not during the first 30 days, Thomas said. Beyond that depends on customer receipts and the warehouse sale. What happens to the employer match? Another director asked. It remains in place during the standstill, I said. Any later change requires a separate benefits review and full board disclosure. Dad looked toward the cash model. This plan is a patchwork of letters and promises. Daniel's transaction is funded. Daniel's transaction also puts the founder's guarantee ahead of employee commitments, I replied. It pays the lender, with money raised against company assets. That is how financing works. No, I said. That is how your financing works. Eleanor asked whether I could guarantee the rescue package would succeed. No. The room went still. I continued. It gives us 30 days to sell a non-essential asset, stabilize orders, and negotiate permanent financing. It will cost contractors work, delay compensation, and force the company to operate under outside oversight. I cannot promise that every job survives. I can promise that the board and employees will know what is being traded and who is paying for it. Thomas added that the lender considered the package credible if every governance condition passed. That was the difference. Daniel offered immediate money tied to incomplete disclosure and family protection. Our plan offered time, pain, and no guarantee that anyone carrying the Cole name would keep control. Eleanor called the votes one at a time. The independent directors rejected Daniel's transaction. Dad objected. His objection entered the minutes. The board removed him as executive chairman and from all executive authority, subject to the company's governing documents and the lender agreement. The restructuring support agreement passed. Dad's pledged shares would be subject to a temporary voting proxy, held by the trustee during the standstill. Savannah's employment as president and acting chief executive was terminated for cause, pending final documentation and any rights under her agreement. Her transaction bonus was frozen for clawback review. My sister closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them again. Daniel's video disconnected before Eleanor finished reading the next resolution. The rescue package passed. Hartwell's extension, the warehouse deposit, the customer advances, and the lender standstill could now move toward closing. Dad stood. You are handing my company to bankers and strangers, he said. I looked at the factory roof beyond the windows. It stopped belonging only to you when you made everyone else pay for your mistakes. Charles gathered Dad's papers. Elaine was waiting outside the boardroom, though she had no official role in the meeting. When the door opened, she went to him. No director followed. Savannah remained in her chair. Eleanor waited until Dad had left, then looked toward me. One matter remains, she said. The company needs interim executive leadership during the restructuring. I did not reach for the nameplate in front of me. Eleanor folded her hands. Meredith, under the governance conditions you proposed, will you accept the position of interim chief executive officer? Eleanor's question settled over the room. Meredith, under the governance conditions you proposed, will you accept the position of interim chief executive officer? Savannah remained seated across from me. Her title had been taken from her less than 10 minutes earlier. Dad had left with Mom and his attorney. Daniel had disconnected before anyone could ask whether Mercer Ridge intended to return the advisory fees already charged. The chair was available. That did not make it mine. I will accept for 2 years, I said, subject to a formal review after the first 12 months. Eleanor picked up her pen. State your conditions for the record. The restructuring officer reports to the independent directors, not to me. Related party transactions require full written disclosure before discussion. Graham holds no executive, advisory, or ceremonial role. The company does not pay his personal legal expenses. One of the directors nodded for me to continue. Management bonuses remain suspended until minimum liquidity is restored. Employee benefit changes require a separate review. The board adds 2 independent seats, and we establish an employee advisory council with access to quarterly operating updates. Savannah watched without speaking. And if the board decides I am part of the problem, I said. The board removes me under the same rules. Eleanor looked around the table. Any objections? No one raised one. The resolution passed. I signed the employment agreement that afternoon, but I did not move into Dad's office. Facilities sealed it for the forensic team, and I asked for a smaller room near operations. My old office remained unavailable while the investigation continued, so I worked from a conference table with Thomas, the interim chief financial officer, and a rotating stack of cash reports. There was no celebration. The lender standstill closed 2 days later. Delaney funded its reduced advance after the money was placed under independent control. Hartwell extended terms on new invoices. The warehouse buyer sent the exclusivity deposit, and the board approved the sale process. Line 4 shut down the following Monday. 4 contractors moved into temporary maintenance work. The other 6 finished their last shift before noon and turned in their badges. I met with them in person, explained the decision, and signed the final paperwork myself. One man named Curtis had installed equipment for us for 8 years. So the company survives, he said. And I still go home without work. For now, yes. He studied my face as though waiting for a promise. I did not make one. We will call you first, if the line restarts, I said. But I cannot give you a date. Curtis nodded once. At least you said it straight. That was not enough to pay his mortgage, and I did not pretend it was. The first month was a string of choices no one wanted. We froze hiring, delayed management bonuses, canceled the expansion project, and sold equipment that had been sitting unused since the automation acquisition. Every morning began with cash on hand, vendor priorities, and payroll timing. Dad had taught me to protect people from truths they could not handle. I did the opposite. At the first employee meeting, I stood on the same factory floor where Savannah had told everyone delay threatened their wages. Marcus stood beside me, not behind me. The company is open, I said. Payroll is funded. That does not mean the danger is over. No one applauded. I explained the line closure, the warehouse sale, and the lender oversight. I also told them future benefit changes could not be hidden inside a transaction packet again. Then I said something I should have said years earlier. I helped create this problem by fixing mistakes without making sure the board understood who caused them. I believed keeping operations stable was enough. It was not. A woman from shipping raised her hand. Are you saying your father caused this? I am saying Graham made decisions that increased the company's debt and protected his own position. I am also saying I spent too long cleaning up after those decisions instead of forcing full accountability. Marcus glanced toward me. For once, I did not need him to tell me I had left something out. The company did not recover in a week or a month. The warehouse sale closed in February. 2 customers delayed orders. 1 left entirely. We restarted line 4 on a reduced schedule in March and brought back 3 of the contractors. By the end of spring, cash was still tight, but the revolving line was stable and vendors were being paid under written schedules. Employer contributions remained in place. Retiree health coverage was unchanged. The board added 2 independent directors and hired a permanent chief financial officer who had never attended a Cole family dinner. Graham fought every step. He challenged the voting proxy, disputed the clawback, and claimed the founder distribution had been properly approved. The forensic audit showed that company funds had been used to cover obligations inside the family holding company, while Cole Harvest borrowed at higher rates. The company and lender filed civil claims. Dad eventually settled. He surrendered part of his shares, repaid the founder distribution, and covered a portion of the investigation costs from personal assets. The voting proxy remained in place through the restructuring period. The legal consequences took longer. The lender referred several certifications and document preservation issues to federal authorities. There was no dramatic arrest, and no one appeared at our boardroom in handcuffs. Lawyers exchanged records for months. Caroline cooperated and admitted she had restored the cached session under Dad's direction because he told her it was necessary to confirm a board archive. Dad denied intending to frame me. The evidence established enough for a negotiated resolution involving a false certification provided to the lender. He received restitution, supervised probation, a period of home confinement, and a court order barring him from serving as an officer or director for several years. His attorney asked whether I would write a letter requesting leniency. I declined. I already spent 20 years reducing the consequences of his choices, I told Rebecca. I am not doing it again. Daniel's ending was quieter. Mercer Ridge opened its own review, then dismissed him for failing to disclose the full effect of his personal relationship and compensation interests. The firm settled our civil claim over fees connected to the failed transaction. Daniel lost the carried interest he expected and disappeared from the trade conferences where he once moved through rooms as though he owned every conversation. Mom lost her role in the company foundation after its records showed money had been used for public relations work protecting Dad. She repaid the amount and sent me 3 letters about family unity. I answered the first one. Family unity does not require me to hide facts, pay personal legal bills, or restore anyone's position. She did not mention unity again. Savannah signed a clawback agreement and returned the bonus tied to the transaction. She issued a written correction to the company, stating that my leave had been part of an independent review and that there was no finding I had stolen data or endangered payroll. She did not return to Coal Harvest. A smaller marketing firm in Milwaukee hired her several months later. She entered below the executive level and had no family name on the building. I learned that through Michael, not from her. For 3 months, we did not speak. Then Savannah sent a message. There was a diner near the original plant where Dad used to take us on Saturday mornings. The booths had cracked red vinyl, and the coffee had always been stronger than necessary. She asked to meet there. I arrived first and chose a booth near the window. Savannah came in 5 minutes late, removed her coat, and sat across from me. No lawyers, no parents, no board packet between us. The waitress poured coffee and left 2 menus. Savannah wrapped both hands around her cup. I knew the future benefits were at risk. I know. I told myself they were still being negotiated. They were, but I also knew I did not want to ask too many questions. Her thumb moved along the rim of the cup. If I asked and did not understand the answer, Dad might decide I was not ready. If I asked and understood it, I might have to say no. I let her continue. I wanted the title. I wanted your office. I wanted everyone to watch you leave after years of watching you correct me. Her gaze rose to mine. Dad used me. Daniel used me. But you were the person I decided to hurt. The waitress returned. Savannah ordered toast and eggs. I asked for the same breakfast I had eaten there as a teenager. When we were alone again, I said, I was right about the deal. I know. I was not always right about you. Savannah looked down. I treated your work like it mattered less because I did not understand it, I continued. I spoke over you. I took projects back instead of teaching you. Then I blamed you for not knowing what I never allowed you to learn. You made me feel stupid. I know. You liked being the only competent person in the room. The sentence would once have started an argument. Instead, I stirred my coffee. Sometimes I did. Savannah's shoulders lowered slightly. That does not excuse what you did, I said. I am not asking it to. Our food arrived. For a while we ate without speaking. Silverware tapped against plates, and the bell above the entrance rang whenever someone came in from the cold. Savannah set down her fork. Do you think you will ever forgive me? I do not know. She nodded as though she had expected that. I am not ready to trust you, I said. Being my sister does not erase what you did. I know, but what you did does not erase that you are my sister either. Her eyes filled, though no tears fell. She reached for her coffee instead. I paid for my breakfast. Savannah paid for hers. Outside, we stood beside our cars while wind moved across the parking lot from the direction of the plant. I will not help you return to Coal Harvest, I said. I am not asking. I will not carry messages from Mom or Dad. I will not bring any, and I will not discuss the investigation beyond what is already public. Savannah pulled her coat tighter. Understood. I opened my car door. Meredith? I looked back. Next month? She asked. The company still needed work. Our family remained broken in places neither of us could repair with one breakfast. Trust would require time, and forgiveness might never look the way Mom wanted it to. But Savannah had come without asking me to save her. For that morning, it was enough. Next month, I said. You should never confuse loyalty with surrender. Family may ask you to stay silent, accept unfair treatment, or protect someone from consequences, but love does not require you to abandon your judgment. Ask questions, keep records, seek independent advice, and refuse decisions that harm innocent people just to preserve someone's pride. You can admit your own mistakes without accepting blame for choices you did not make. Forgiveness does not have to be immediate, and reconciliation does not require restored trust. Sometimes the wisest choice is to protect what is worth saving, set boundaries, and let others face what they created.